Do you ever lie awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, replaying that one awkward thing you said in a meeting 3 years ago? Or maybe you post a photo on Instagram and then you check your phone every 30 seconds, waiting for that dopamine hit of validation and feeling a literal pit in your stomach if the likes don't roll in fast enough. It's exhausting, isn't it? We walk around carrying this invisible weight, a constant low-level anxiety that we are being judged. We contort ourselves into pretzels, trying to meet expectations that half the time we just made up in our heads. We worry about disappointing our parents. We worry about annoying our boss. We worry about being too much or not enough for complete strangers on the internet.
It feels like a trap. And the worst part is, we feel like we're the only ones stuck in it. But here is the truth. This is the universal human struggle. You are not broken because you care what people think. You're just, well, you're trapped in a very specific way of viewing the world. But what if I told you there's a way out? What if you could essentially flip a switch? What if you could walk into a room, be completely authentic, and truly, deeply, not care if the people there didn't like you? That is the core promise of the book we are diving into today, The Courage to Be Disliked by Ichiro Kishimi and Fumitake Koga. Now, this isn't your typical self-help book with a checklist of 10 ways to be confident. It's actually a philosophical dialogue, the debate between a cynical, unhappy youth and a wise philosopher who teaches the psychology of Alfred Adler. Adler was a contemporary of Freud and Jung, but his ideas were radically different, and honestly, they are a little hard to swallow at first. The book argues that happiness isn't something that happens to you, it is a choice you make right now. It argues that all those expectations weighing you down, you can just set them down. You can be free. But the cost of that freedom is the courage to be disliked. It sounds simple, right? But the implications are absolutely life-altering. In the next section, we're going to tackle the book's first and arguably most controversial claim, the idea that trauma does not exist.
Welcome to The Last Read, Books for Your Ears, Wisdom for Your Life. If you haven't already, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss a single step of this journey. Today, we are walking through a literary phenomenon that has shaken up the self-help world by challenging the very foundation of how we view our past and our future. We are exploring a book that makes the audacious claim that trauma, as we typically understand it, does not exist. It argues that happiness isn't a destination you work toward, but a choice you can make instantly.
I know, that sounds radical, maybe even a little dismissive, but I promise you, by the end of this episode, that perspective might just be the key that unlocks the cage you feel stuck in. And if you want to follow along or dive deeper, remember that the link to buy a copy of The Courage to Be Disliked is waiting for you in the description.
But to understand how such a bold claim can even be made, we first need to understand the minds behind it and the very unusual way they chose to present these ideas. This isn't a lecture, it's a conversation, specifically a dialogue between two very different characters, a cynical youth and a wise philosopher.
So, who are the architects of this conversation? You have Ichiro Kishimi, a philosopher and certified counselor in Adlerian psychology, living in Kyoto. He is the expert, the man who has spent decades studying Greek philosophy and the work of Alfred Adler. And then you have Fumitake Koga, an award-winning professional writer. Koga actually discovered Adlerian psychology in his late 20s and was so struck by its ideas that he sought out Kishimi, essentially to learn from a master. He made repeated visits to Kyoto to debate and discuss these concepts, and those real-life conversations became the foundation for the book itself. This is why the format is so unique. It's written as a Socratic dialogue, modeled after the way Plato wrote about Socrates. It's not a dry textbook where an expert lectures you from a podium. Instead, it's a narrative, a battle of words.
On one side, you have the philosopher. He claims the world is simple, that life is simple, and that happiness is within reach for everyone, instantly. On the other side, you have the youth. And the youth is, well, he's cynical. He's dissatisfied. He looks at the world and sees a chaotic mess of contradictions. He doesn't just disagree with the philosopher, he wants to debunk him. He wants to prove that this happiness is a choice stuff is just idealistic nonsense. And the brilliance of this format is that the youth represents us. He represents every doubt, every yeah but that pops into your head while you're reading. When the philosopher says something radical, the youth gets angry and fights back, asking the exact questions you would want to ask. It's through this friction that we get introduced to the third giant of psychology.
Most of us know Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, the titans of the 20th century. But there was a third founding father, Alfred Adler. While Freud and Jung focused heavily on the past, on the unconscious, and on how our history shapes us, Adler took a completely different path, one that is often overlooked, but is arguably far more empowering. Adlerian psychology, or individual psychology, doesn't ask where you came from, it asks where you are going. And this is where the philosopher drops his first, and perhaps most explosive, truth bomb on the youth. It's a concept that challenges the way almost all of us interpret our own pain. The youth comes in ready to complain about his past, about the things that made him the way he is. And the philosopher looks him in the eye and tells him that the very thing he is clinging to, his trauma, doesn't actually exist. It sounds impossible, right? How can you say trauma isn't real? Well, to understand that, we have to look at the difference between two very big words, etiology and teleology.
Etiology is the study of causation. It's the framework most of us grew up with, the conventional wisdom that dominates mainstream psychology and our own dinner table conversations. It relies on a linear timeline, cause and effect. It says, I am the way I am today because of what happened to me yesterday. If you go to a doctor because you have a high fever, they look for the cause, a virus, an infection, so they can treat it. We naturally apply this same logic to our minds. We say, I can't trust people because my ex-partner cheated on me, or I have a bad temper because my father yelled a lot. This is the Freudian view. It's deterministic. It suggests that our present is entirely determined by our past, and since the past cannot be changed, we are, in a sense, prisoners of our own history. But Adler flips the script entirely. He introduces teleology, the study of the purpose of a given phenomenon rather than its cause. In this view, you aren't driven by the past, you are driven by a goal that you have set in the present. The philosopher in the book uses a striking example to illustrate this, one that is quite common in Japan, known as hikikomori, or acute social withdrawal, but it translates perfectly to anyone who has ever felt too anxious to leave their house.
Imagine a young man who refuses to step outside. He tells everyone he wants to go out, he wants to work, he wants to have friends. But every time he tries to open the door, he is paralyzed by palpitations and fear. Etiology, the cause and effect view, would say his fear is the cause. He was bullied in the past or rejected, and now he has this trauma that causes his anxiety, preventing him from leaving. But the philosopher challenges the youth with the teleological view. He argues that the young man didn't get anxiety and then decide to stay in. No, first he had the goal of not going out. Perhaps his goal is to avoid the possibility of rejection, or to force his parents to worry about him. To achieve that goal, he manufactures the state of fear and anxiety. He isn't staying indoors because he is anxious. He is creating anxiety so that he can stay indoors. I know. Take a moment with that. It is an incredibly hard pill to swallow. When you first hear it, it feels cold. It feels like an accusation. It sounds like the philosopher is saying your pain isn't real, or that you are choosing to suffer on purpose. But Adler isn't denying that the emotion is real. The fear feels very real. The palpitations are real. But he argues that we use these emotions as tools. We treat our trauma as a shield.
If you believe that your past determines your future, you are powerless. You can't hop in a time machine and fix your childhood. You are a victim of circumstance. However, if you accept Adler's view that you are acting in service of a present goal, then the power shifts back to you. If you are creating anxiety to serve the goal of safety, you can choose a different goal. You can choose to step out, even while trembling. It suggests that we can change our lifestyle at any moment simply by changing our purpose. We aren't machines simply reacting to previous data inputs. We are agents actively shaping our lives. But this raises a massive question. If we are choosing our emotions and our lifestyles, why would anyone choose to feel inferior? Why would we choose to feel unlikable or unhappy? It seems counterintuitive to choose suffering. Well, to answer that, we have to look at the context in which we live, because according to Adler, we don't exist in a vacuum. And the source of that suffering, and the reason we might cling to it, brings us to the philosopher's next major proposition. It's a bold claim that simplifies the entire human experience into a single category of struggle.
And that claim is, essentially, that all problems are interpersonal relationship problems. Let that sink in for a moment. All problems are interpersonal relationship problems. At first glance, this sounds like an exaggeration. You might be thinking, what about money? What about sickness? What about just feeling not good enough? But the philosopher in the book pushes the youth to run a thought experiment, and it is a fascinating one. He asks us to imagine, what if you were the only person in the universe? If you were truly alone, completely solitary, the concept of money would instantly vanish. It would just be paper with no value because there is no one to trade with. The concept of loneliness would disappear because you wouldn't know what the company of others felt like to miss it. Even your appearance, whether you are tall or short, beautiful or plain, would become meaningless. In the book, Adler uses the example of height. Being 5 feet tall isn't objectively a problem. It doesn't cause you pain or suffering on its own. It only becomes an inferiority. It only becomes a source of pain when you are compared to someone else who is 6 feet tall.
The value isn't intrinsic. It is assigned through the context of others. So when we feel suffering, when we feel that gnawing sense that we aren't enough, we have to admit that this feeling doesn't come from within us. It comes from the friction of bumping up against other people. This brings us to one of the most misunderstood terms in psychology, the inferiority complex. We toss this term around casually in American culture. Oh, he's just got an inferiority complex. But Adler is very specific here. He says having a feeling of inferiority is actually healthy. It's a stimulant. It's that gap between where you are and where you want to be, and that gap makes us strive for superiority. It makes us build skyscrapers and write symphonies. The complex, that toxic state, arises when we use that feeling as an excuse. It's when we say, because I am A, I cannot do B. Because I am not well educated, I cannot be successful. Because I am not attractive, I cannot find love. It becomes a crutch, and usually that crutch is built entirely on comparison. Think about your average Tuesday night. You are feeling fine, you had a decent day at work, you're eating a sandwich you like. Then you open your phone. You check Instagram or LinkedIn, and you see a former classmate just got promoted to vice president, or your cousin is posting photos from a yacht in the Mediterranean. Suddenly, that sandwich tastes dry. Your job feels like a dead end. You feel miserable.
Nothing in your actual physical reality changed. You are the same person you were 5 seconds ago. But the interpersonal relationship, the comparison, shifted. You entered a competition you didn't know you were playing. Adler argues that life is not a competition.
It's not a race where you have to elbow others out of the way to win. He says that if you see life as a competition, you will always be plagued by interpersonal relationship problems. Because even if you win, even if you get the promotion or the yacht, you will live in constant fear of losing your position. You will see everyone else as an enemy, waiting to overtake you. But if all our problems stem from our relationships with others, from this constant web of comparison and expectation, surely the answer isn't to just become a hermit, right? We can't just delete the other 7 billion people on the planet. We have to interact. We have to work, love, and coexist. So, how do we stop the judgments and expectations of others from dictating our happiness? How do we exist in a world of relationships without becoming a slave to them? Well, Adler proposes a radical mental tool for this. It is a way of drawing a line in the sand, a specific method to determine exactly where your responsibility ends and where someone else's begins.
Adler calls this tool the separation of tasks. And honestly, it's a bit of a weapon. In the book, the philosopher describes it as a sword, a sharp blade that cuts through the Gordian knot of interpersonal relationship problems. If you remember your Greek mythology, the Gordian knot was this impossibly complex tangle that no one could untie. Alexander the Great didn't bother trying to untie it. He just sliced it in half with his sword. That is what the separation of tasks does for our relationships. The principle is deceptively simple. You need to ask yourself one question: whose task is this? And the way you answer that question is by asking who is going to receive the result of that action. Who bears the ultimate responsibility? Let's look at the classic example from the book, a child studying. Parents often shout, nag, or bribe their kids to study. They think it's their job to make sure the child learns. But Adler stops us right there. He asks, if the child doesn't study, who ultimately bears the consequences? Who gets the bad grades? Who struggles in class? Who has to deal with the limited options later in life? It's the child, not the parent. Therefore, studying is the child's task.
When a parent commands a child to study, they are intruding on the child's task. And the book argues that all interpersonal relationship troubles are caused by this, by intruding on other people's tasks, or having your own tasks intruded upon. Now, this doesn't mean you abandon the child. Adler uses a famous proverb here: you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Your task, as a parent or a friend, is to get them to the water, to provide the environment, the support, the encouragement. But the act of drinking? That is their task. If you try to force the horse to drink, you are just going to get a lot of splashing and a very unhappy horse. And this applies everywhere, especially in the workplace. Imagine you have a boss who is always angry, constantly shouting, never satisfied with your work, no matter how hard you try. Most of us would feel miserable. We'd think, I need to work harder to make him happy, or I'm failing because he dislikes me. But apply the separation of tasks. Doing your work to the best of your ability, that is your task. Judging that work, deciding to be angry, specific emotional reactions, that is their task.
You cannot control their emotions. You cannot control their assessment. So why are you trying to? When you try to manage your boss's feelings, or your partner's mood, or your friend's opinion of you, you are trying to live their life for them. The book puts it bluntly: attempting to control things that are not your task is a form of slavery. You become a slave to their reactions. You are constantly walking on eggshells, tailoring your life to avoid someone else's judgment. So, the solution is to draw that line. You say, this is my task. I will do it well. That is your task. I will let you handle it. It sounds cold, doesn't it? It sounds like you're cutting people off. But Adler argues it's actually the only way to have healthy relationships.
Because when you stop carrying everyone else's baggage, you finally have the energy to carry your own. But here is the catch, and it is a big one. If you actually do this, if you stop trying to please everyone, if you stop taking responsibility for other people's feelings, something specific is going to happen, something that most of us are terrifyingly afraid of. It brings us to the very title of the book. Because this kind of separation, this refusal to be a slave to other people's expectations, it comes with a cost that defines what it actually means to be free.
It defines what it actually means to be free, because that cost is being disliked. Yes, you heard that right. Freedom, true freedom, is being disliked by other people. Now, I know that instinctively feels wrong. We are wired to want to be liked. We are social creatures. We want the applause, the nod of approval, the good job. But Adler asks us to look at what that actually requires. If you are living to satisfy other people's expectations, if you are constantly gauging their feelings so they don't get upset with you, whose life are you living? You aren't living yours. You are living theirs. You become like a politician who has fallen into populism, constantly changing your policies just to get the votes, until you don't even know what you stand for anymore. You might be liked, sure, but you are unfree. You are in a prison built by their expectations. So, here is the hard truth the book delivers. If you want to exercise your freedom, if you want to live in accordance with your own principles, there is a cost. You have to be willing to be disliked. When someone dislikes you, it is not a sign that you have failed. It is proof. It is proof that you are living freely. It is a sign that you are exercising your autonomy and refusing to be a slave to someone else's script. Now, please do not misunderstand me here. This is important. The goal is not to go out and be a jerk. We aren't trying to be disliked. That would just be another form of seeking attention, wouldn't it?
The goal is simply to not be afraid of it, to see that dislike is just the byproduct of you doing your task and them doing theirs. If you are living your life honestly, some people won't like it, and that is okay. That is the price of admission for freedom. And once you accept that price, once you stop fearing that judgment, the entire way you look at the people around you changes. You stop seeing them as judges. You stop seeing them as people you need to impress, or people who are above or below you in some social hierarchy. Instead, you start to see something else. You start to see that maybe, just maybe, we aren't competitors fighting for approval. We are something much simpler and much more profound.
We are equals. In Adlerian psychology, this is the shift from a vertical relationship to a horizontal relationship. See, most of us were trained from birth to see the world vertically. It's a ladder. There are people above us, parents, teachers, bosses, celebrities, and there are people below us. We spend our whole lives trying to climb that ladder. We want to be above others because we think that's where worth comes from. If I'm the boss, I'm valuable. If I'm the subordinate, I'm less than. But Adler says no. He says we are all different, yes. A child is different from an adult. A CEO is different from a waiter. But we are equal. Different, but equal. This is where it gets tricky, especially in our culture. We think, well, of course I respect everyone. But do we? Think about how you interact with a CEO versus how you interact with a waiter at a restaurant. If the CEO walks in, you might straighten your tie, watch your language, maybe try a little too hard to impress. But with the waiter, maybe you're polite, sure, but do you give them that same level of deep, attentive respect? Or do you see them as someone purely there to serve you?
If your behavior changes based on who you're talking to, you are still operating in a vertical relationship.
You are seeing hierarchy, not humanity. And this vertical mindset creates a dangerous tool that we use every day without thinking: praise. Now, you might be thinking, wait, hold on, praise is good. I should praise my kids, I should praise my employees. But Adler, he disagrees strongly. He argues that praise is actually a form of manipulation. Think about it. When do you praise someone? You praise them when they do what you want them to do. If a mother tells her child, "Good job cleaning your room," that sounds nice. But the subtext is, "I am the judge. I am above you. You have met my standard." It's a judgment passed from a superior to an inferior. When we praise, we are reinforcing the hierarchy. We are training people to seek our validation. We are training them to live for our approval, not their own fulfillment. So, if we can't scold, because that's bad, and we can't praise, what on earth are we supposed to do? We encourage. It sounds similar, but the energy is totally different. Praise is looking down and judging. Encouragement is standing next to someone and appreciating.
Instead of saying, "Good job," or "You're so smart," you say, "Thank you." You say, "I'm really happy you did that," or "That was a huge help to me." Do you feel the difference? Thank you isn't a judgment. It's an expression of gratitude between equals. It acknowledges their contribution without ranking them. And this is the secret sauce. This is what Adler calls community feeling. When you stop judging people, when you stop looking up at them in envy or down at them in arrogance, you start to feel like you are actually part of a whole. You realize that you have a place here, not because you're special, not because you're better than anyone else, but simply because you contribute. You are of use to someone. And when you feel that you are part of a community of comrades, you don't need to be special to have worth. You don't need to be the winner of the rat race. You can just be. And once you realize that you don't have to constantly race towards some future peak of success to matter, it completely changes how you experience time itself. Because if the goal isn't the destination, what happens to the journey?
Well, if the destination isn't the point, then the journey stops being a journey at all. This leads us to one of the most mind-bending concepts in the entire book. We tend to think of our lives as a line. You start at birth, you draw a long, squiggly line through school, work, marriage, and eventually you reach the end. We see the past as a solid trail behind us and the future as a line stretching forward. But the philosopher in the book stops the youth right there. He says, "Do not treat life as a line. Think of life as a series of dots. It's a series of moments, independent, discrete moments. If you look at a chalk line under a magnifying glass, it's not actually a solid line, right? It's a bunch of tiny dots sitting next to each other." Adler argues that our lives are exactly the same. We only live in this dot, right here, right now. The past dot is gone. The future dot doesn't exist yet. Now, why does this matter? Because most of us are living what Adler calls a kinetic life. That's a fancy way of saying we are obsessed with getting from point A to point B. Think about mountain climbing. If you treat life like climbing a mountain, the only thing that matters is the peak. You have your head down, enduring the struggle, sweating, miserable, just waiting for that one moment of glory at the top. But here is the dark side of that thinking. If you die halfway up the mountain, your life is a failure. You never made it. You spent your whole time on the way, but never actually arrived.
Adler says, "Stop climbing, start dancing." This is my favorite analogy in the book. Think about a dance. When you dance, the goal isn't to get to a specific spot on the floor. You don't dance to arrive at the other side of the room. If you did, the most efficient way to dance would be to run straight across the floor and stop. No, you dance to dance. The joy is in the movement itself. It's what the Greeks called energia, process that is complete in itself. If you are dancing and the music suddenly stops, you haven't failed. You danced. It was complete the entire time you were doing it. This totally reframes success. It means you don't have to wait until you get that promotion or that house or that wedding ring to start living. If you are living earnestly in this moment, in this dot, you have already arrived. But, and here's the hard pill to swallow, to do this, you need what the authors call the courage to be normal. This hits hard for a lot of us, especially in a culture that worships being special. We are terrified of being average. We think that if we aren't exceptional, if we aren't the CEO, the star athlete, the influencer with 1 million followers, then we don't matter. We think normal equals incompetent. But Adler says that's nonsense. Being normal is not a bad thing. You do not need to flaunt your superiority to have worth.
When you accept that you are normal, that you are just a human being among other human beings, you stop needing to prove yourself. You get off the hamster wheel. You stop checking to see if everyone is watching you climb the mountain, and you just start dancing. You might be thinking, okay, that sounds nice, but what is the meaning of it all then? If I'm not climbing to the top, what's the point? The book's answer is blunt. Life in general has no meaning. I know, it sounds bleak, but wait. Adler says life has no inherent meaning except for the meaning you give it right now. You are the only one who can assign meaning to this specific dot you are standing in. You don't find meaning by looking at the summary of your life when you're 80. You create meaning by how you choose to act in this very second. So, if you can let go of the past, if you can stop engaging in the rat race, and if you can treat the person in front of you as a comrade rather than a competitor, you are free. You are free to dance. Now, I know what you're thinking. This philosophy sounds incredible. No trauma, no competition, just freedom and dancing in the moment. But how do we actually keep this up? It feels like something you learn and then forget 5 minutes after you walk out the door. Well, the authors knew that too, and they have a final message about what it really takes to live this way.
So, here is the harsh but liberating truth that the philosopher drops on the young man at the very end. He says, if you want to truly master this way of living, if you want to rewrite your lifestyle and fully embody this freedom, it takes time. Specifically, Adler believed it takes half the number of years you have lived to truly learn and apply this psychology. Think about that for a second. If you are 40 years old right now, it will take you 20 years of practice to fully integrate this. If you are 20, it will take you 10 years. It's not a magic pill. It's not a switch you flip. You don't just read the book, close the cover, and suddenly stop seeking validation forever. You don't just decide, I'm free, and never feel the weight of expectation again. It is a practice. You will slip. You will find yourself trying to please people. You will find yourself interfering in other people's tasks. You will find yourself blaming your past for your current unhappiness.
But the point is, you start. Because the journey is what matters. We've covered a lot of ground in this series, and I want to quickly remind you where we've been. We started by shattering the idea of trauma. We learned that your past does not determine your future. You do. You determine it by the meaning you give it right now. We talked about the separation of tasks, the realization that other people's opinions of you are their business, not yours, and that your only task is to live your own life as truthfully as you can. We talked about community feeling, that deep sense of belonging that comes not from being special or being superior, but from contributing to others, from seeing the people around you not as enemies, but as comrades. And finally, we talked about the courage to be normal, the courage to be disliked, the courage to dance in the moment right now, without needing a destination.
It is a radical philosophy. It is, as the authors admit, strong medicine. But if you start today, if you take that first step, you are already walking on the path of freedom. It might take half your life to master, but you have to start sometime. Why not now? This has been a deep dive into the courage to be disliked. I hope it has challenged you, provoked you, and maybe even annoyed you a little bit. That's usually a sign that you're onto something real. If you enjoyed this journey and want to dive into our next book, make sure you are subscribed to The Last Read. We have some incredible titles coming up that you won't want to miss. And if you haven't actually read the book yet, please go do it. My summary can't compare to the dialogue in those pages. There is a link in the description to buy it. Thank you for listening. Go out there, have the courage to be disliked, and enjoy the dance. I'll see you in the next one.